They say trust is the most expensive currency. I just never expected the bill to come from my own mother. My name is Harper Quinn, and I design military-grade encryption systems for a living. Which is ironic, considering how spectacularly I failed to detect the most personal breach of all. It happened 6 weeks ago. I had just secured a $30 million defense contract for a quantum storage system, something that could redefine the future of global intelligence. Before the official handoff, I needed to store a prototype and $10 million in physical currency overnight. Just one night, one safe place, one person I trusted, so I chose my mother. She's 68, retired, always claimed to have no interest in my money or what I did for a living. She still clipped grocery coupons and watched old baking shows. I figured her house, and more specifically, the biometric vault I had installed for her years ago, was the safest place I knew. The next morning, she was gone. Her phone disconnected. Her house empty. The safe swung open like a mouth in mid-laugh. And the 10 million vanished. She left a note. One line. Thank you. Harper. Now I get to live the life I was never allowed. Now, you're probably expecting panic. Maybe rage, heartbreak. But me, I laughed, because what she didn't know was that what she took wasn't what she thought it was, and what she left behind was far more valuable. I grew up in a house where emotions were rationed like sugar during war. My mother, Irene Quinn, was a high school math teacher for 32 years, disciplined, meticulous, and immune to nonsense. She didn't believe in bedtime stories, just multiplication tables and life lessons delivered with the sharpness of chalk snapping against a blackboard. We lived in a small town in northern Oregon, tucked between gray skies and pine trees. My father died when I was 5, heart attack. Sudden. And from that moment on, everything in our lives became about control. Mom didn't cry at the funeral. She folded the flag they handed her with robotic precision and told me, "The world doesn't pause for grief. Remember that." So I learned to make myself small, quiet, efficient. By the time I was 8, I could do our taxes on TurboTax. At 10, I had figured out how to install Linux on my school laptop without tripping the district's firewalls, and by 12, I was coding games under a fake developer name and selling them on sketchy forums. Mom never asked what I was doing on the computer all day, only that my grades remained perfect, and I didn't shame her with teenage stupidity. There were no hugs, no "I'm proud of you." Praise came in the form of upgraded pencils or the occasional permission to skip a chore. Still, I didn't resent her. In her own rigid way, she loved me. I saw it in the way she made hot tea when I had exams, or the way she always waited in the car outside science fairs. Even when I forgot to invite her in, I was her only child. Her entire investment portfolio, emotionally speaking, but the deeper I dove into tech and encryption, the more it felt like we were speaking different dialects. By college, I was light years away at MIT, surrounded by chaos theory, cryptography, and minds that didn't scoff at imagination. I started to realize something: Mom didn't hate risk. She hated being left behind by it. I graduated top of my class at 21. By 24, I'd already sold my first software patch to a cybersecurity firm. At 27, I launched my own company, QuinnCrypt, specializing in hybrid AI encryption protocols. It wasn't easy. I lived off instant noodles and learned to navigate the tech world as a young woman surrounded by condescending venture capitalists who couldn't pronounce blockchain without asking if I needed a male co-founder. But I endured. Quietly. Like she taught me. And when QuinnCrypt landed a defense contract prototype last fall, one worth $30 million, I flew home for a weekend and told her in the kitchen while she made toast. She didn't scream, she didn't tear up. She stirred her coffee and said, "Just be careful. Harper, big wins attract scavengers." I thought she meant outsiders. I thought she meant them. Looking back now, maybe she meant herself. The irony: I installed the safe in her house, 5 years ago. She had a break-in, nothing stolen, just a shattered window and some overturned drawers. I came home, saw the damage, and had a full panic attack. That same week, I hired a private firm to install a top-tier biometric safe in the wall behind her bedroom bookcase. She scoffed, called it overkill. But I insisted. I said, better to be safe than sorry. She'd looked at me then, her eyes unreadable, and replied, "There's always a price for feeling safe. Harper, always." I didn't understand what she meant, not then. Now, that line feels prophetic. Even after QuinCrypt scaled up and I moved to Seattle, I kept checking in. I sent her money each month, even though she claimed she didn't need it. Paid off her mortgage, bought her a new car. And when I asked her if she'd want to come live with me in the city, maybe get out of the little town she'd known her whole life, she declined. Some people build palaces out of zeros and ones. She said, "I prefer my weeds and my quiet." I smiled at the time. Now I see the cracks. I see how every act of care I gave her might have felt like charity, how success, even when shared, can sometimes feel like an indictment. There were signs, subtle ones. A flicker in her eyes when I mentioned travel. A tightening of her jaw when I offered to pay for home renovations. A laugh that was too short when I joked about her retiring early. But I didn't see them for what they were. I didn't think she'd ever take anything from me. Because in my mind, she was the moral bedrock, the woman who once returned a miscounted $5 bill to the grocery store, who yelled at me for copying homework once in middle school and made me apologize to the teacher in front of the whole class. She was inflexible, but she was honest. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Because when someone you trust completely decides you're no longer worth protecting, it changes something in you. Still, that change wouldn't come until the morning she vanished. Right now, as I recount the beginning, all I remember is thinking, if there's anyone on Earth I can trust with $10 million and a prototype that could shift the world's balance of power, it's my mother. God, was I wrong? Success didn't come in a thunderclap. It arrived as a series of quiet, incremental validations. A meeting request from someone who doesn't usually take meetings. A secure file sent with a gov address. Then, one night in late January, the email that changed everything. From Department of Defense, Advanced Technology Projects, Reproposal QuinCrypt QX9. Approval granted, Stage 2 initiated. I blinked at the screen for a full minute before I could breathe again. QX9 wasn't just a contract. It was the culmination of nearly a decade of my work. A portable, quantum-level encryption system capable of storing sensitive intel on a drive smaller than a sugar packet. No cloud servers. No third-party vulnerabilities, no backdoors. Only 3 people in the world had access to the full specs. Myself, my technical co-lead, Amina, and my lawyer, Richard. The feds didn't want servers. They wanted physical. They wanted tangible. And with tangible came transfer risk. That's how the $10 million came in. Part of the initial payout was cash as security clause. The military wanted to see how the device handled transactions, even in off-grid conditions. I was to hold it for 48 hours, then hand-deliver both the money and prototype to a secured government site outside Tacoma. They offered to handle storage themselves. Of course, but my pride wouldn't allow it. This was my tech. I wanted control over every aspect, right down to the safe it would sleep in. I didn't trust banks with hard currency, not in amounts like this. Safety deposit boxes had size restrictions. Private vaults required disclosures I wasn't willing to make. That's when the idea came to me, my mother's safe. It was absurdly secure. Biometric scanner with retina fallback, reinforced alloy plating, and a false front to throw off casual thieves. I'd had it installed myself, overseen the specs, even stress-tested it during a visit home. More importantly, it wasn't traceable. No rental contract, no digital record, just a hidden vault in a sleepy house that hadn't been touched by crime in decades. It seemed perfect. I called my mom the week before. Hey, I'm coming down next weekend. I've got something important I need to stash in the safe for a night. It's delicate. Think of it like digital diamonds. She didn't ask many questions. Just said, I hope they're not real diamonds. Harper, I don't want my neighbors thinking I'm laundering cartel money. I laughed. She didn't. But she agreed. I told myself it was convenience, familiarity, the illusion of intimacy built on old memories. But if I'm being honest, part of me also wanted to remind her I trusted her. That despite all our differences, our distance, she was still my foundation. I flew down with the prototype and arranged for Kyle, the head of the private security firm I'd worked with before, to handle the money transfer. Their protocols were strict. No cash was ever handled without surveillance. Everything was tagged, verified, wrapped in tamper-proof, chemically coated polymer. On the morning of the drop, I met Kyle and his team at a secure logistics site outside Portland. That's when I signed the form. At the time, I barely registered it. My mind was on the prototype, the logistics, and the dozens of NDAs I was juggling. Trevor, the same security guard who would later appear at my door with news that unraveled everything, handed me a clipboard. Standard override clause, he said. In case of interference or high-risk transport interruption, we swap the bundles with dummies. Trackers stay embedded. Real currency remains secured in our vault. I nodded, signed, moved on. It was supposed to be a precaution, a line in a sea of liability paperwork, and I forgot about it. The money was sealed in 3 matte black duffel bags, no markings, no zippers you could tear without tools. The prototype was in a 4th case, a sleek titanium shell with a biometric latch keyed to my thumbprint and retina. Trevor and his partner Marcus escorted me directly to my mother's house. It felt nostalgic, in a strange way. The same cracked walkway, the hydrangeas I planted at 12 still struggling by the porch, the faint smell of cinnamon and starch, always hanging in the kitchen. Mom greeted us like it was a casual visit, wore her old apron, made tea. She even offered cookies to the armed guards like they were visiting grandsons. But I noticed her eyes, flickering too much, her smile too tight, her hands too steady for someone watching me carry what I'd vaguely referred to as valuable equipment into her house. She led us into the bedroom, then stood back as I opened the bookcase and revealed the safe. I keyed it open, no hesitation, slid the bags inside, relocked it. All done, I said. She smiled. How long's it staying? Less than 48 hours. I'll be back to pick it up with my team. All right, she said, a little too breezy. You hungry? I made shepherd's pie. That night we ate in silence. She asked about Amina, about Seattle. Nothing deep, just surface scratches. Before bed, she gave me fresh sheets, kissed my forehead like she hadn't since I was 10, and said, "You always did bring chaos in a briefcase." I thought it was a joke. Now I wonder if it was a confession. I woke up that morning to a strange silence. No kettle whistling. No footsteps. No NPR humming faintly from the kitchen radio. Just an unnatural stillness that settled over the house like a fog. It was 7:42 a.m. I remember because I glanced at my phone expecting a flood of notifications. There were none, except for a single message from my team reminding me of the handoff meeting the next morning. Everything was on schedule, except something felt off. I swung my legs out of bed and padded barefoot across the hardwood floors. "Mom," I called out, half expecting her to be out back watering the garden. No answer. I tried her bedroom first. Her bed was made, perfectly made, hospital corner tight, like no one had slept in it at all. I moved to the guest room. Empty. The kitchen tidy. No coffee pot, no toast crumbs, not even the faintest smell of breakfast. Then I noticed the small change. The calendar on the fridge where she always wrote down her garden club meetings and blood pressure checks had been wiped clean, blank squares where scribbled ink had lived just yesterday. Something cold curled in my stomach. I turned the corner into the hallway and stopped in front of the sliding bookcase that concealed the safe. It was open a crack. Not fully, just barely enough to betray what was coming. I pressed my palm against the wood and slid it back. The safe was open. The duffel bags were gone. My breath caught in my throat. No, 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 I muttered, dropping to my knees. I checked inside empty. I ran to every closet, under beds, behind curtains, like maybe, just maybe, this was some terrible test, a prank. Some form of deranged surprise party. Then I saw it. A note, taped to the inside of the refrigerator, her handwriting precise. Elegant. The way she used to write my permission slips. Harper, thank you for the trust. Now I get to live the life I was never allowed. Don't come looking. Mom. My knees buckled. I sat on the floor, the letter trembling in my hand. It wasn't just the money, or even the prototype. It was her. My mother, who once told me character is what you do when no one's watching, had waited until no one was, and stolen everything. I fumbled for my phone and called her, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Then I called Richard, then Kyle, then Amina. My hands were shaking. My thoughts spiraled. What would the government say? Would I be held liable? What if she sold the prototype? What if it was in enemy hands already? The house spun around me. Then, almost as an afterthought, I tried the security app on my phone. Kyle's team had installed a backup tracker, buried deep in the polymer casing of each duffel. I had ignored the notification protocol that morning, too focused on breakfast and departure. But now, I tapped the app, offline. All 3 trackers silent, either destroyed or somewhere out of range. Jason, my ex, used to say I never panicked properly, that I went cold instead of hot. I just shut down, become mechanical. He was right, because after 5 minutes of sitting stunned on my mother's floor, I stood up and methodically opened every drawer in the house. I looked for passports, credit card statements, clues. There was nothing. No luggage, no travel guides, no goodbye, just absence. And that note. It would take me 2 more hours to stop trembling, 3 to file the police report, 4 to talk to Richard about legal options. But the one thing I didn't do, I didn't cry. Because somewhere in the haze of disbelief, a faint pulse of clarity broke through. She doesn't know. She thinks she has it all. She thinks she got away. And that was the only thing keeping me from screaming, because she'd taken bags filled with what looked like 10 million and a prototype case with blinking lights and polished titanium. But what she didn't realize was that none of it was real. Not the cash. Not the shell device. She'd stolen a beautifully crafted illusion. And the real asset that was still with me. The first person I called after the police was Trevor. He picked up on the first ring. Miss Quinn. She took it. I said, all of it. The cash, the case. She's gone. There was a pause, but not the kind laced with panic. His voice remained calm. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, he stood in my mother's kitchen, arms crossed, scanning the space like it was an active crime scene. She didn't force the safe, he murmured, crouching. No visible damage. She didn't need to. I opened it myself. He looked up at me slowly. Did you receive any tamper alerts on the duffels? No, I said. The app's offline. They must have been disabled. Trevor stood and pulled out a small device from his pocket, a handheld scanner the size of a stapler. He turned it on and walked toward the empty space where the bags had been. A low-frequency pulse hummed through the air. A few seconds later, he frowned. Odd. No chemical signature. What does that mean? He turned to face me. It means the bills she took weren't real. I stared at him. Trevor walked to the dining table and set the scanner down. The cash we delivered, it wasn't actual UN currency. It was a decoy, paper crafted to the exact specifications of the real thing. Only difference is the chemical composition. That's what this scanner detects. That's not possible. I said, I signed for actual cash at the facility. You were there. Yes. But you also signed a special instruction form 3 days earlier. You don't remember. My stomach dropped. I remembered signing something, vaguely, a single sheet tucked into a stack of waivers and protocols. I hadn't read it carefully, just assumed it was standard procedure. I was too focused on logistics, deadlines, clearances. Trevor opened his phone and pulled up a document. He turned the screen toward me. My signature stared back. The line above it read, "Authorize switch to contingency protocol in the event of risk to payload integrity." You gave the order, Trevor said gently. We followed it. I stumbled back into one of the kitchen chairs. So where's the real money? The actual prototype in a climate-controlled vault at Kyle's facility. He said, secured under your name. 2-factor biometric lock. No access without you. I sat there for a full minute, trying to process what I was hearing. My mother hadn't stolen the real assets. She'd stolen stage props. And the worst part? She didn't even know it. Trevor must have seen something shift in my expression because he leaned forward. Miss Quinn, what exactly is going through your mind right now? I started laughing. Quietly at first. Then harder. Until I was practically wheezing. Not because it was funny, but because the weight of it all, months of prep, years of pressure, the betrayal, the rage it had finally turned in on itself. She thinks she's won, I said. She thinks she's on a yacht somewhere with $10 million in untraceable cash and a device worth triple that she's going to figure it out eventually. Trevor said. Or someone will tell her. Maybe. But by then? I looked up. How long before the trackers in those decoy bills reactivate? Trevor hesitated. That's the thing. They already have. He pulled out a tablet and opened a tracking dashboard. A blinking red dot appeared on a digital map. Last signal pinged from Marrakesh, Morocco, yesterday. My mother was halfway across the world, carrying fake money, with traceable chips, and a dummy prototype. She walked into her own trap, I whispered. Trevor gave a tight nod. That's the other thing you authorized, embedding smart tracers into the decoy bundles. Her movements are being recorded across multiple relay servers. We've got her digital trail. A long silence passed between us. Then I said, Can we trace any other movements? Anyone she contacted, anyone helping her. We'd need a team. Surveillance. Legal cover. I'll get it, I said. We'll do this quietly. No public disclosure, no press. Not yet. What do you want to do? Harper. I stood, straightened my jacket, looked at the safe still ajar, like it was waiting to laugh again. I want to see exactly how far she thinks she can go, before the story catches up with her. Marrakesh. Of all the places on Earth, I never imagined my mother would end up in a city wrapped in color, chaos, and con artistry. But that's where the tracker pinged. 3 days after the theft, I stood in a private intelligence firm's war room in Seattle, watching a blinking red dot hover just east of Jama El Fana. Every 6 hours, it jumped. From souks to riads, from boutique restaurants to rooftop lounges. She wasn't hiding. She was exploring. I don't understand, I muttered. How is she spending money that isn't real? Kyle, standing beside me, crossed his arms. Tourist zones, luxury shops with distracted clerks, cash-based services that never verify denominations. They're likely using the money in small, flashy increments. What happens when she tries to deposit it? I asked. Kyle raised an eyebrow. That'll be the end of the illusion. Still, something didn't sit right. My mother was clever. Yes. But careful to a fault. She double-checked oven knobs 3 times. She used exact change at the store. This spending spree. The private plane. The missing passports, it wasn't her style. She wasn't acting alone. I called Detective Amanda Reyes, a private international investigator I'd met during a prior cybersecurity case in Zurich. Within 48 hours, she confirmed my suspicion. She had help. Amanda said over a secure call, flight manifests, hotel bookings, even identity forgeries, all professionally handled. These weren't YouTube tutorials. Someone with resources and reach orchestrated this? I clenched my jaw. Who were tracing digital breadcrumbs? A known identity broker named Leon Berto was seen meeting with someone matching your mother's description 2 months ago. Casablanca. She used the name Annette Ward. I felt my stomach twist. My mother had started planning this long before the prototype was even finished. She knew about the contract, I murmured. Months ago. She pretended she didn't care. She made tea, she asked about Amina. Amanda didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I knew the truth now. My mother hadn't just betrayed me in the moment. She had laid the groundwork, patiently, methodically. While I thought I was protecting her, she was plotting how to take from me what I hadn't even built yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk in my apartment overlooking Lake Union, lights from houseboats dancing on the surface. The dummy prototype, now recovered, rested on the shelf beside my childhood copy of The Westing Game, a book Mom gave me when I was 10, saying, "Smart girls solve puzzles," and I had solved hers. But the question still loomed, why? Why would a woman who lectured me about ethics conspire with criminals? Then I remembered something. 6 months earlier, during a casual call, she mentioned her pension being less than expected. She'd sounded tired, defeated. I brushed it off, transferred another $5,000 to her account. She never mentioned it again, but maybe that was the first crack. A few days later, Amanda called again. We traced a series of wire transfers through shell corporations tied to offshore accounts. They matched the digital fingerprints of a shadow group known as the Quarterfold, the What-A network that targets disillusioned seniors, mostly women. They pitch it as an exit strategy for the overburdened. Sometimes it's passive identity swaps. Other times it's full-blown heists. Your mother fits their profile to a T, retired, isolated, bitter about lost time. My throat tightened. She wasn't just manipulated, Amanda said. She was recruited. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. Was this my fault? Had my success, my relentless forward motion, left her standing still for too long? Had I reduced her role in my life to that of a safe? With a smile, had she joined them? Just to feel powerful again. 2 more pings came through in the next 3 days, one from Istanbul, the other from Dubai. She was traveling in style business class, high-end hotels, no caution. Whoever had trained her had done so with precision. I assembled a team, Kyle for logistics and protection, Amanda for global intel, my COO and best friend Haley, to handle legal coordination and cleanup back home, and Richard, my lawyer, to oversee damage control with the Department of Defense. So far, no one knew the real prototype had never left Seattle, but we were on borrowed time. We met in a borrowed suite at a hotel near SeaTac, which we dubbed Command, pinned maps, open laptops, data streams, facial recognition scans, and there, in the center, a photo of my mother at 17 standing proudly in front of her valedictorian banner. "Next step," Amanda asked, snapping me back. I took a breath. "They're not running randomly," I said. "They're preparing for something. A sale, a trade, a handoff." To who I narrowed my eyes at the screen. "That's what we're going to find out." We tracked them through 4 countries in 9 days, from Dubai to Nice, from Nice to Prague, then finally Kyoto. Each move was deliberate, not frantic, not careless. They weren't running from anything. They were moving towards something. Amanda was the one who cracked it. While analyzing digital footprints from a burner phone connected to one of the hotel routers in Nice, She found encrypted messages routed through a dark web relay coded in a style familiar to former intelligence assets. Embedded in the metadata was a phrase translated from Latin, "Only those who were never invited can truly disappear." It was a quarterfold tag. They were prepping for an identity finalization, new passports, new biometric records, permanent digital footprints to replace their old ones. Kyoto wasn't just another destination. It was the last stop. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt nauseous. We arrived 2 days later on a commercial flight. I watched cherry blossoms drift past the terminal windows like quiet confetti. The city felt serene, holy, almost. A cruel contrast to the weight I carried in my chest. The tracker pinged just before sunset, a ryokan in the Arashiyama district, high-end, discreet. It catered to clients with privacy preferences. According to their website, Amina secured us an observation room across the street under the guise of a honeymooning couple needing creative inspiration. Haley joined me. Amanda stayed mobile with Kyle, circling the perimeter with a rotating surveillance team. From our vantage point, I saw her, my mother, wearing linen and pearls, drinking tea in the garden like a woman who had always belonged to that world. I felt something sharp twist inside me. Not hate, not even betrayal, just confusion. What kind of person becomes this unrecognizable in a matter of weeks? What kind of mother looks at her daughter and sees a target that night? Amanda intercepted a digital key drop via blockchain, a one-time transaction routed through a cutout node in Singapore. It pointed to a meeting scheduled in Kyoto the following evening at a temple known for its isolation and loose security, Daikakuji. This was it. Not just a goodbye to their former lives, but the potential handoff of the decoy prototype they still believed was real. "I want to be there," I said. Kyle didn't like it. Amanda warned against it. Even Haley hesitated, but I was done watching from behind cameras and glass. This started with me. It was going to end with me. We moved at dawn, dressed in black, minimal gear. Amanda arranged for quiet police backup stationed discreetly around the temple in unmarked vans. I entered through the western gate alone. The air was cool, tinged with incense and damp wood. The temple grounds were mostly empty except for a few monks and scattered tourists. And then I saw her, standing by the koi pond. My mother. She turned before I said anything, as if she had known I was coming. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. "You always did hate surprises," she said. I didn't return the smile. Ironic. "Considering how much you love giving them?" She tilted her head. "How did you find me? Because you wanted me to." I said, "Every post, every ping. You weren't hiding, you were performing." She didn't deny it. I stepped closer. "So tell me, Mom, what was the plan? Hand off what you think is a $30 million prototype and ride into a new life with a fake name and 5-star room service. I had a choice," she said quietly. "Fade into irrelevance, or finally live." I stared at her. "By stealing from your daughter, I gave you everything I had." "Harper," she snapped. "My time, my health, my years. You built an empire with your mind. All I ever had was proximity to yours." I let that hang in the air, let her hear the echo of her own words. "You know the saddest part," I said. "You didn't even steal the real thing." Her face faltered. "What, the prototype, the money, all fake? Every last bit." She blinked. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," I said, stepping forward. "You took theater props, flashy decoys designed to flush out betrayal. Congratulations. You were the trap's final test and you failed. For the first time." She looked unsteady, and then panic. "You're lying." I shook my head. "No. But I am done chasing you." With a subtle hand signal, Amanda and Kyle emerged from the temple archway. Japanese authorities followed behind them quietly. politely but firmly. My mother looked around, desperate now. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me. You already left me," I said, "long before today." They escorted her away gently. I didn't follow. I just stood there, watching cherry blossoms fall in slow, silent loops across the pond's surface. The holding room at the Kyoto Metropolitan Detention Center was quiet, clinical. There was no glass partition, no dramatic two-way mirror, just a table, 2 chairs, and a woman who used to be my mother, sitting in front of me in a beige robe with hands folded like she was waiting for a doctor's appointment. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. The pearls were gone, replaced by stark lighting and institutional air. "I don't want a lawyer," she said without looking up. "I just want to talk to you. I'm not here to negotiate," I replied. "Neither am I." She raised her head then, and I saw them. The same steel-gray eyes that once scanned my math homework with surgical precision now stared at me not with guilt, but with something stranger. Pride, or the remnants of it. "I suppose you feel clever," she said. "No, just heartbroken." Her lip twitched. "Don't be dramatic." "You stole from me. I took what I felt was owed," she said calmly. "Owed?" My voice cracked sharper than I intended. "You lived in a mortgage-free house I bought you, drove a car I paid for, received monthly deposits for groceries, prescriptions, anything you needed. You never once asked. I just gave, and you still found a way to convince yourself you were the victim?" She didn't flinch. "You're confusing charity with closeness." That sentence stunned me. She leaned forward. "You gave me things. Harper. But never you. Never your real self. Always the schedule, the tight calls, the 5-minute updates between boardrooms. You sent money because it was easier than calling. Easier than asking how I felt about watching my only child become a stranger with a title. That doesn't excuse what you did." I didn't say it did. I stared at her. "You know what hurts the most," I said. "It's not the plan. It's not even that you went through with it. It's that you had to pretend. For months? Smile at me. Bake me pie. Ask about my friends all while planning your exit. I did love you," she said. "I still do. But you loved the escape more." We sat in silence. "I didn't think the money was real." She whispered finally, "What I thought it was? Symbolic. A statement. I didn't think you'd put actual millions in my house. I thought maybe it was a bluff, a test. And when I opened that safe and saw it, Harper, something broke in me. I didn't know whether to believe her. You made yourself untouchable," she said. "The money just reminded me how far you'd gone." I exhaled slowly. "You could have just told me. You would have wired more money." That stung, because it was probably true. She leaned back, suddenly tired. "They promised I'd disappear, that no one would be hurt, that it would be clean. They—" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore." "No," I said firmly. "It matters to me." She didn't speak again. Not during the remaining minutes, not during the official questioning, and not when the Japanese authorities handed her over to Interpol for extradition processing. Rebecca, my cousin, was found 2 days later in Florence. Her new blonde hair was a poor disguise, and her fake passport purchased under the name Elsa Monroe was flagged when she tried to check into a hotel under a loyalty rewards number linked to her real identity. She didn't ask to see me, but she sent a letter. Scrawled across 3 pages in erratic cursive, she rambled about how she never meant for it to go so far, how Mom had changed after I went to MIT, how everything I achieved felt like a mirror held up to her own failures. She said she just wanted a taste of that world, a world where people opened doors for you, not asked you to clean behind them. And then she ended with this, "You'll always be the sun. Harper." I just wanted to know how it felt to stand in the light for a little while. Even if I had to steal it, I stood in front of the U.S.'s embassy days later, legal counsel in one hand, the prototype in the other. I handed it over with signed authorization, confirming the real version had never left our vault. Clean, untouched, untarnished. My contract remained intact. The government never learned the full scope of what happened, and I didn't tell them, not to protect my mother, but to protect myself, to keep the betrayal mine. Personal, not national. In the weeks that followed, extradition paperwork stalled, multiple jurisdictions got involved, lawyers debated definitions of intent to defraud versus successful fraud. Mom's team argued she had no way of knowing the money was fake, therefore, technically, no crime had occurred involving actual stolen assets. But I had the receipts, and the trackers, and most of all, the betrayal. Eventually, both she and Rebecca were charged with conspiracy to commit international fraud and attempted intellectual property theft. The sentences would be lighter than I expected. Maybe 5 years, maybe less. I had a choice. Push for maximum penalties, or let go. I met with Richard back in Seattle, overlooking the Sound. He laid out my options in dry legal terms: sentencing phases, cooperation deals, public disclosure risks. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" I stared out the window. "She's already lost," I said finally. "You're sure she wanted freedom? A new life?" She wanted to erase the version of herself who raised me, who felt small, and now she's in a 6x8 cell with fluorescent lights and a plastic tray of powdered eggs. Richard nodded slowly. "I'll press charges," I added. "But I won't drag it out. No media, no press tour, no vengeance. She might see it as weakness. Then she never understood me." A month later, I moved out of my glass-walled apartment in downtown Seattle. Too clean, too sterile, too full of memory echoes. I bought a cabin just outside Snoqualmie, tucked beneath evergreens and draped in moss. There was a fireplace, a porch swing, and a studio where I began designing again, not for the government, not for prestige, but for myself. Jason came to visit once. We sat on the porch, sipping tea like nothing had happened. "You still laugh in your sleep," he said. "I do." He smiled. "Yeah. You used to dream code. I think I still do." He didn't stay, but that was okay. He wasn't part of the new chapter. He was the exclamation point on the last one. Haley came more often. We hiked, talked, rewired old friendships. She never pushed, just listened. And in that quiet, I started to heal. The real prototype remained sealed, ready for future versions. But I never built another like it, because some designs don't need to be improved. They just need to be learned from. I never visited my mother in prison, but I sent her a package once, a single book, The Westing Game, with a note on the inside flap, "Smart girls still solve puzzles." But now I know the most dangerous puzzles aren't encrypted. They wear familiar faces. It took time, longer than I'd expected, and more painful than I'd ever admit aloud. Grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about the living, the ones who choose to walk away from you, the ones you thought would never be capable of what they did. My mother was alive, somewhere in a federal detention facility, doing time. Rebecca, too. I followed the case for a while, court dates, hearings, legal updates. But eventually, I stopped clicking on the links. I stopped letting the anger in. Not because I forgave them, but because I chose to reclaim the bandwidth they'd stolen from me. Instead, I filled my time with rebuilding not the business, but myself. I took a sabbatical from QuinCrypt, stepped down as CEO, and handed over the company to my COO, Haley. It was the easiest difficult decision I've ever made. Because even though I had created something that changed the landscape of cybersecurity, I was no longer the same woman who built it. That Harper was made of sleepless nights, caffeine-fueled code, and the desperate desire to prove she could outrun her upbringing, but I couldn't outrun it forever. So I stopped running. Instead, I started hiking, reading, cooking, visiting old friends I hadn't seen since college. I went to therapy twice a week, then once a week, then every other Thursday. I cried, I cursed, I questioned everything I believed about loyalty, about blood, about what it meant to be good. I even let myself imagine a world where my mother had asked for help instead of stealing it. Would I have given her money? Absolutely. But that's not the point, because she didn't want help. She wanted power to flip the equation, to stop being the one who needed and start being the one who took, and no amount of generosity from me would have ever rewritten that imbalance in her head. One rainy morning, I walked into a local high school as a guest speaker. The counselor, an old friend from MIT, had invited me to talk about cybersecurity careers. I almost said no. I didn't want to be the woman whose claim to fame was almost getting robbed by her mother, but I said yes. And when I stood in front of 30 bright-eyed students and told them about algorithms and digital forensics and how the strongest code wasn't the one no one could break, but the one that adapted when someone tried, I saw something shift in myself. They weren't looking at me like I was damaged. They were looking at me like I knew something they didn't. And for the first time in months, I felt whole. I started writing again. Not code journals, then essays, then op-eds under a pseudonym. Eventually, I wrote the story. Not the classified parts, not the prototype, not the legal case, but the truth. What it feels like to be betrayed by someone you love. What happens when trust fractures at the root. I submitted the piece anonymously to an online publication. It went viral. Thousands of messages poured in, people who had been conned by family, manipulated by partners, lied to by people they thought were sacred. And again, I realized something: I wasn't alone. Pain has a way of making you believe you're isolated. But resilience is a network, a language, a community built in the aftermath. Months passed. I still lived in the cabin. I still didn't visit her. But I did go back to the safe one day. My mother's house had been sold during the asset forfeiture process. The new owners tore out the bookcase and found the biometric vault behind it, still sealed. I showed up with a locksmith, opened it, and retrieved the one thing I'd left behind: the original spare key. Inside a velvet pouch still tucked into the wall. No one had ever noticed it. That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because somehow, even after everything, part of me had still hoped she would find the right way in. One night, much later, I sat on my porch swing under a blanket with a cup of black tea. The stars were out, the kind you can only see when the world around you finally quiets. And I thought about what I'd lost. Not the money. That was always recoverable. Not the prototype. That was always a decoy. But something deeper. The idea that love alone was enough to prevent betrayal. It wasn't. And maybe that's okay. Because what I've learned is this: trust is not a guarantee, it's a risk we take over and over again. A leap, a gamble, and sometimes we lose. But we can choose after the wreckage to rebuild anyway. To love again, cautiously but sincerely. To believe again, not because it's safe, but because it's necessary to live a full life. So here's my last message. If you've made it this far, if someone you love betrayed you, it says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Let it hurt. Let it burn. Then rise anyway. Because sometimes the things people try to steal from us, trust, peace, identity, are the very things we grow back stronger. Not despite the betrayal, but because of it.